Pessoal, esse vídeo, continuação daquela série sobre a minha rotina e mostrando aqui, me preparando para entrevistas em inglês para a vaga de desenvolvedor Python Sênior. Tem aqui alguns tópicos de Python que eu estou revisando para poder memorizar isso, que são coisas que podem ser perguntadas. Não só de Python, mas coisas que estavam na descrição da vaga. E aqui do lado direito é uma matriz de preparação para perguntas sobre o meu comportamento em determinadas situações, determinados projetos. Mais detalhes tem no vídeo anterior.
Python core, Python basics. Everything is an object. Names bind to objects. No built-ins. List tuple dict set. Slicing. Comprehensions. Truthiness. And eat Python core, Python basics. Everything is an object. Names bind to objects. No built-ins. List tuple dict set. Slicing. Comprehensions. Truthiness. And EAFP. Try except. Versus LBYL. Exceptions and troubleshooting. Catch specific errors. Add context with raise. From. Always clean up. Finally, context managers. Use logs. Traceback. Breakpoint. Functions and decorators. First class functions. Closures. Args chords. Parameter kinds. Dot. Decorators add cross-cutting behavior. Use functools wraps to keep metadata. Comma interpreters. CPython. GIL. PyPy. JIT. MicroPython. Pyodite. Threads help IO bound. CPU-bound multiprocessing or native code that releases the GIL. NumPy Python. Python OOP. Data model dunders. Repr. Len. ITER. Jeditor versus JIT attribute. Prefer composition. Use @dataclass for value objects. Properties descriptors for invariants. Async programming. Async await. Event loop. Cooperative scheduling. Great for many IO ops. Add timeouts. Cancellation handling. Bounded concurrency. Semaphores. Databases. RDB versus NRDB. RDB. SQL plus ACID. Joins. Strong consistency. NoSQL. Flexible schema. Scale out. Model to access patterns. Document key value column time series. Indexes. B-tree. Range. Order. Versus hash. Equality. Composite order must match queries. Trade-off. Faster reads. Slower writes. Memory cost. Normalization. 1NF/2NF/3NF reduce redundancy. Denormalize for read hotspots with care. Views. Caches. Materialized views. Foreign keys. FK. Enforce referential integrity. Cascades. App. Level checks only when you accept weaker guarantees. Comma triggers. Automatic DB actions. Audit-derived fields. Powerful but can hide side effects. Document and test. Stored procedures. SP. Push heavy set logic to DB. Version and test like code. Watch portability. Git. Merge versus rebase. Merge preserves true history. Merge commit. Rebase rewrites to linearize local work. Never rebase shared branches. Cherry pick. Apply specific commits across branches. Resolve conflicts. Avoid duplicating changes. Docker. Containerization versus virtualization. Containers share the host kernel. Lightweight. VMs emulate hardware. Stronger isolation. Heavier. Comma image versus container. Image equals immutable template. Layers. Container equals running instance of an image. Volumes. Persistent data outside the container file system. Prefer named volumes for portability. Ports. Map host. Container. Expose only what's needed. Prefer app-level health endpoints. Compose. Define multi-service stacks in YAML. Services. Networks. Volumes. Health checks. NV solution architecture. Patterns. Layered clean hexagonal to isolate domain. CQRS and event sourcing for read-write separation. Saga. Circuit breaker. Retry. Bulkhead for resilience. Comma microservices. Bounded contexts. Independent deploys. Each service owns its data. Async messaging where possible. Strong observability. Traces metrics logs. Solid. SRP1 reason to change. Op. Extend. Don't modify. LSP. Substitutable types. ISP. Small interfaces. Dip. Depend on abstractions. Pub sub. Decouple producers consumers. Understand at least once versus exactly once. Idempotency. Ordering. DLQs. Retries with jitter. Python testing. Frameworks. Unitest. Split. Class-based. PyTest. Fixtures. Simple asserts. Huge plugin ecosystem. Robot. Keyword-driven acceptance E2E, unit testing. Arrange act assert. Fast and isolated. Mocks fakes. Parametrization. Property-based tests for tricky logic. Coverage guides. Risk drives. SDLC implementation. Software development methodology. Trunk-based or short-lived branches. Definition of done includes tests. Docs. Security checks. Code review. Small PRs. Clear intent. Naming. Architecture fit. Automated checks. Lint format type. Security perf considerations. Release strategy. CI artifact CD. Feature flags. Blue, green, and canary. Rollback playbooks. Version contracts. Code standards. Formatters. Black. Linters. Rough. Typing. MyPPWrite. Pre-commit hooks. ADRs for significant decisions. Continuous integration. Pipelines as code. Cache depth layers. Parallelized tests. Artifact storage. SAST-DAST dependency scans. Under 10 minutes if possible. Cloud. Serverless. OS GCP Azure. Design and implement. Master IAM. Networking. VPC subnets peering. Compute. VMs. Containers. Serverless. Storage. Object block. Manage DBs. Messaging. Observability. Principles. Multi-AZ. Autoscaling. Least privilege. Encryption. Backups DR. Cost controls. Right-sizing. Spot. Lifecycle. IAC. Terraform CloudFormation. Edge IAT latency and identity. DevOps. CI. Build tools in CI. Use Maven and MS Build to compile test package reproducibly. Pin versions. Cache artifacts. CI tools. Jenkins TeamCity GitHub GitLab. Pipelines as code. Secrets management. Artifact repos. Environments. Improve CI. Caching. Parallelism. Test impact selection. Flaky detection quarantine. Fast feedback. Pipeline observability. Software development methodologies. Scrum. Time-boxed sprints. Roles. POSM dev. Ceremonies. Inspect and adapt. Watch WIP and backlog quality. Kanban. Continuous flow. WIP limits. Cycle time and throughput. Visualize bottlenecks. Policies explicit. Waterfall. Phase-gated. Requirements designable test deploy. Good for compliance stable scope. Slow feedback when scope shifts. Exceptions and troubleshooting. Q. When would you re-raise? A. When you can't handle the error locally or after adding context cleanup. Either raise. Preserves original or raise new error. From E to keep the causal chain. Q. How to preserve stack? A. Prefer raise or raise. From E instead of raise E. Logging with exe info equals true also retains the traceback. Functions and decorators. Q. Explain args versus quargs. A. Args packs positional extras into a tuple. Quargs packs keyword extras into a dict useful for forwarding calls and flexible APIs. Q. What does functools wraps fix? A. It copies metadata, name, doc, module, annotations from the wrapped function so introspection, help, and tooling work correctly. Interpreters. Q. When do threads help despite the GIL? A. For IO-bound tasks where threads often wait on network disk, while one thread blocks, another runs. Q. How to bypass the GIL for CPU-bound work? A. Use multiprocessing, vectorized native extensions, NumPy, Cython, Numba, or C extensions that release the GIL. Oop. Q. Difference between JETDitor and JIT-attribute? A. JIT-attribute runs for every attribute access. JETDitor runs only if normal lookup fails. Misusing JIT-attribute can cause recursion. Delegate with object. JIT-attribute. Self. Name. Asynchronous programming. Q. Explain cooperative multitasking. A. Coroutines yield control at a waypoint so the event loop can schedule other tasks. No preemption. Your code must be polite and await frequently. Q. How to cancel tasks safely? A. Call task cancel. Handle Asyncio cancelled error. And use try finally for cleanup. Optionally Asyncio shield critical sections. Databases. Q&A. Q. When should you denormalize? A. When read performance or availability needs outweigh write complexity, e.g., heavy aggregation, hot paths, or offline reporting. Use views, materialized views or caches, with clear ownership and rebuild strategies. Q. How do you find a missing index from a slow query? A. Inspect the plan. Explain, analyze. Check sequential scans on selective predicates. Align composite index order with filter sort. And verify cardinality selectivity. Git. Q&A. Q. Interactive rebase use cases? A. Squash cleanup commits. Edit messages. Reorder or split commits before opening a PR to keep history atomic and meaningful. Q. Commit hygiene guidelines? A. Small, single-purpose commits. Imperative titles. Add X. Fix Y. Include rationale. Keep diffs focused. Run linters tests before commit. Docker. Q&A. Q. Why keep images small? A. Faster pulls builds. Fewer CVEs. Smaller attack surface. Cheaper bandwidth storage. Quicker CI/CD. Q. What are multi-stage builds? A. Build in a heavy stage. Compilers. Tooling. Copy only final artifacts into a minimal runtime stage. Drastically shrinks the image. Solution architecture. Q&A. Q. How do you handle schema evolution across services? A. Backward compatible changes. Versioned endpoints events. Consumer-driven contracts. Schema registry. Avro Proto. Blue-green or Canary for producers. And idempotent. Tolerant readers. Python testing. Q&A. Q. How do you test async code? A. With PyTest plus PyTest Asyncio initio. Use at PyTest mark Asyncio. Async fixtures. And libraries async test clients. E.g. HTTPX async client PyTest HTTPX. Q. How do you make flaky tests reliable? A. Remove nondeterminism. Random seeds. Wait on conditions instead of sleeps. Isolate external systems. Mocks test containers. Control time clock. And run retries only as a last resort. SDLC implementation. Q&A. Q. How do you keep pipelines under 10 minutes? A. Heavy caching. Deps. Docker layers. Test sharding parallelism. Change-based test selection. Split fast slow suites. Ephemeral environments. And fail fast stages with good observability. Cloud. Q&A. Q. How do you build a multi-AC, auto-healing, cost-aware web API? A. Put an L7 load balancer in front of auto-scaling stateless app instances, XX or serverless, multi-AZDB, RDS with read replicas, and cache, Redis memcached, IAC, observability, blue-green deploys, backups DR, and cost levers, right-sizing, spot for workers, life cycle policies, DevOps, CI tooling, Q&A. Q. Tell me how you cut pipeline time by 50%. What levers do you pull? A. Cache depths and Docker layers. Parallelize. Run impacted tests only. Pre-commit hooks to shift left. Containerize deterministic build images. And stub externalize slow integrations. Rapid classic questions. Now is QA. Q. Explain the GIL succinctly. A. C. Python's GIL allows only one thread to execute Python bytecode at a time. Use threads async for I/O. For CPU-bound tasks, use multiprocessing or native code that releases the GIL. Q. Async versus threads. When each? A. Async for massive I/O concurrency with cooperative scheduling. Threads when you rely on blocking. Thread-safe libraries or you need simpler mental models. Cat pools and propagate cancellation. Q. How do you approach indexing strategy? A. Start from query plans. Create composite indexes matching filter plus sort order. Drop low-value indexes. And measure write overhead regression with benchmarks. Q. Merge versus rebase. What do you do day to day? A. Rebase my local feature branch for a clean history before PR. Merge into main for shared history to avoid rewriting others' commits. Q. Docker best practices in one breath? A. Multi-stage builds. Minimal base images. Non-root user. Pinned versions digests. Health checks. env-driven config. Logs to stout spare. Q. Your default testing stack? A. PyTest with parametrization and fixtures. Hypothesis for property tests. Contract integration tests at service boundaries. And async E2E where appropriate. Q. Microservices resilience essentials? A. Idempotent handlers. Retries with jitter. Circuit breakers. Bulkheads. DLQs. Timeouts. And distributed tracing. Each service owns its data and evolves via versioned messages.
E aqui aquelas perguntas comuns. Tell me about yourself. I'm a senior software engineer focused on Python. I have 5 years experience with Python. And in my previous project, I worked in a system for a logistic company, and I worked as a Java and Kotlin backend developer with Spring Boot, and I was responsible for developing some REST API endpoints as a backend developer. And what is your most impactful project? Was our checkout latency spiked during peak traffic test, reduce P95 under, and I profiled hotspots, introduced async IO, and added a Redis cache plus security breaker. Describe a time you handled the production incident. A billing service caused duplicate charges. I need to stop impact and restore trust. I led the war room, shipped the feature flag rollback, added independence keys, and wrote a postmortem. And we resolved in 45 minutes, refunded all users, and we added runbooks alerting to prevent recurrency. Tell me about a conflict with your teammate and how you resolve it. We disagreed on using salary versus event streaming. I pick a scalable option fast. I proposed to short a spike with load tests and defined the decision criteria, throughput, OPS cost, and we chose streaming, hit SLA comfortably, and the relationship improved because the process was fair. A time you disagree with your manager or product manager or project manager, uh, a project manager wanted shipping a large scope in one release, reduced the risk. I proposed uh, my task was to reduce risk. I proposed to phase rollout with thin slice, such as metrics and feature flags. We launched the earlier, validated assumptions, and avoided a risk big bang. How do you handle ambiguity? To handle ambiguity, I try to clarify the outcome, the constraints, and the success metrics, and then I design a first interaction. For a vague improve reliability goal, I set SLO, error budgets, and prioritize the top 3 failures mode. That turns ambiguity into an ordered backlog and miserable progress. Tell me about your failure and what you learn. I once shipped that schema change without a backward compatible plan. It caused read errors on older services. I learned to use expanded contract migrations, dark launches, and contract tests. Since then, zero downtime incidents from schema changes. Lead without authority, mentoring juniors. I pair weekly, pair weekly, fazendo um vídeo.